So there we go. This session is being recorded, and please keep all your questions respectful as well. Okay, so a little bit now about the Conservation Ecology SIG. So we're a group, and our aim is to facilitate the exchange of information between conservation ecologists, whether they're theoretical, applied, or practitioners in the field. And we host events such as this throughout the year and at the BES annual meeting. And if you haven't been to one of our pub quizzes at the BES annual meeting, you're missing out, so I highly recommend you join us this year. We also do a range of other things, such as we release podcasts, and we actually have one coming out soon on the challenges of conserving non-charismatic species, so keep an eye out for that. And you can find out about this and much more in our newsletters, which get sent out every month or so. And I'll put a link to where you can sign up for those in the chat in a minute as well. We also have our analysis, where our policy officer goes into a deep dive on often controversial topics in conservation, which can be found on our blog on our website, so make sure you check those out. And this is our second Project Forward event. And what is Project Forward? Well, Project Forward is our initiative for over the next few years, and our aim is to help people create future working environments that are equitable and inclusive, and to overcome some of the barriers to engaging in conservation and ecology careers. So last year, we had a fantastic panel event on transdisciplinary science, and this year, this is our event. And why are we choosing this event? Well, as artificial intelligence becomes increasingly integrated into conservation science and practice, it's really critical to ensure that its application promotes equity rather than exacerbates existing social and global disparities. So who do we have chatting with us today? So we have four amazing speakers. Unfortunately, Sab can no longer join us because his little one is ill, so he's having to look after them. But we have our other amazing speakers, such as Professor Chris Sandbrook, who's Professor of Conservation Science and Society at the University of Cambridge. We have Dr. Jenna Lawson, who's a biodiversity scientist at UK Centre of Ecology and Hydrology. We have Situ Vakutozeli, who's a drone and AI project coordinator at Darwin Wildlife Conservation Trust, and also the Madagascar programme, and also a PhD student at Liverpool John Moores University, Liverpool. And we have Dr. Kelly Martineau, who's an entomologist at the Cyprus Institute. And just again, if you need it, here's the QR code for joining the Slido, but it should also be in the chat. Fantastic. So that is enough from me at the moment. And I'd like to invite Chris to start the presentations off.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. It's a real pleasure to be here and a fascinating and very important topic. So thank you for the invitation to be part of the panel. Yeah, maybe a bit unlike others in the panel and probably most of you in the audience, I'm a social scientist working on conservation. So although my original training was in ecology and conservation science for the last 20 years, I've been thinking more about conservation from a social perspective. And that's involved over the last 10 or 15 years work on digital technology and conservation and its social and political implications. So yeah, with the explosion of interest in AI over the last couple of years, I've also started to be thinking about that. So that's just to kind of give you a little sense of where I'm kind of coming from with this. Hopefully you can now see my rather extraordinary image that ChatGPT gave me of my thinking about AI and conservation. And I'm just going to speak for a few minutes, hopefully not take up too much of your time, with some kind of general thoughts. And I'll start initially with what I see as some opportunities for AI and what it might contribute towards equity, but then also talk about maybe some of the risks and challenges that we face, and finish with a little bit on what I see as actually the wider implications, which perhaps are not getting as much attention as they could do around this topic. So yeah, first on opportunities, I mean, you will all be very well aware of some of the new things that we're able to do with AI in conservation, and of course much of that is very, very exciting. This nice review paper was published last year by some colleagues of mine in Cambridge with others about what those opportunities might be. And I suppose one of the things that is very clear from that work is that it's now becoming possible to do things that people could not previously do at a lower cost and with lower kind of barriers to entry. So you might be able to get your head around some very technical thing like coding, using an AI assistant. And I think from an equity perspective, we can see how that might make it just easier for more people to do conservation and to do ecology. And in a more inclusive sense, that just kind of lowers the barriers to entry for getting involved in this kind of work for a lot of people, which could be a very positive contribution to equity. This could also help those of us working in conservation to engage more meaningfully with other audiences. So not conservationists themselves, but people that we work with in conservation. So for example, using AI tools to facilitate translation into all kinds of different languages so that we can better communicate with local residents who might be affected by conservation action. And if we're being really kind of ambitious and stretching ourselves, we could even think about whether that might include communicating better with non-human species. And there are some really interesting projects going on now to try and use AI models to understand and interpret things like whale song. Or this example I've got on the screen here is from a project from a team at Nature Perspectives who have used a kind of ChatGPT based model to simulate non-human perspectives. So they're not trying to directly translate anything, but they're training a model to interact with you as if it was a whale or any other species. And we've been testing this in Cambridge with things like allowing you to have a conversation with an exhibit in the Museum of Zoology. You can talk to a dodo about its life history and its experience, and people seem to find that an incredibly engaging way of learning about and encountering non-human species. And maybe that might expand beyond the human a little bit, what we think about what we can do with these technologies. There are, of course, all kinds of risks and potential unintended consequences. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the kind of biophysical material side of this, the climate change impacts, the water use, the energy use, all of which I think are likely to have to fall in an unequitable way on human society. So we know that relatively marginalized people are already primarily the victims of climate change, and that will only be exacerbated by some of these impacts from AI. There's a lot of debate about just how bad these things are, whether they're terrible or not so bad, and I'm not technically well placed to answer those questions, but just to say that there's clearly a range of views on that question. Then we have the really important question of the data on which AI systems are trained and based, and there's a lot of evidence that there's a huge amount of bias in those data sets. This paper on the left about bird ecology data just shows how data collection is spatially biased, and there's a lot more data available from relatively more affluent neighborhoods in North American cities and much less from less affluent and often areas of cities where there are people of color living in greater density, and that those kind of underlying inequities in the data sets might then feed through into outputs and decisions that might be supported by AI analysis that would not be an accurate reflection of the real world and might further entrench some of those inequities. And this really nice paper on the right from Uzerdo and colleagues that came out a couple of years ago actually did some analysis of what AI chatbots were producing in terms of ecological knowledge and advice and where that information seemed to come from. And they found that they said in the middle of the abstract here, their results showed that more than 2/3 of the chatbot's answers rely on the expertise of male academics working at universities in the United States, while largely ignoring evidence from low and lower middle income countries. So I think we have to be really aware of and concerned about the kind of equity implications of poor data being fed into these systems and what we might be able to do about that. I think AI as well is kind of feeding into the broader trend of seeking to collect as much data as we possibly can about the world and about the ecology of the world, but also the people of the world, and all of the kind of drones and camera traps and audio listening devices and everything else, which produce the data that we then want to feed into AI models. And I think, again, a lot of that is brilliant and has huge potential benefits in conservation. But some of the work I've been involved with, particularly with my colleague Trishant Simlai, has looked into what some of the social implications of that can be on the ground in the places where these devices are being deployed. And his work, for example, in North India, found some really unpleasant side effects on local women in the way that they were able to engage with and use the forest as a social space after camera traps were introduced. The camera traps were there to take pictures of wildlife, but they effectively extended the male gaze into the forest in a way which really changed the way that women were using the space. And I would thoroughly recommend that you have a look at the paper I've cited there at the bottom if you want to kind of hear more about that. We also have to be aware, of course, that others will be using AI for their own ends. And just as some of these tools are available to the conservation sector, they're also available to people who want to use AI tools to support illegal hunting or to generate deep fakes that might mislead or misdirect people in what they think about issues that we care about in conservation. So we've also got to be kind of tuned into that side of the equation as well. And then my kind of final broad point I wanted to make was about what I think are some of the wider implications of AI for conservation. So I think we tend to think about how can we use AI within conservation and ecology to advance our work and hopefully to advance equity. But actually, if we believe even half of the hype that's going around at the moment, AI is going to have a massive impact on society at large, including many of the things which are the underlying drivers of biodiversity loss. So it's going to change agriculture, it's going to change human healthcare and demographics, it's going to change our labor markets and our economies, which are associated with the flow of goods and materials that are the drivers of biodiversity loss around the world. And at the moment, I think in conservation, we're not really paying enough attention to what might that look like for nature and climate. And there could be some real opportunities for benefits. There could also be some real problems that could come down the road. And all of those will have equity implications for people as well. So I'm kind of calling for a bit more attention to those bigger picture questions of nature and climate in, for example, how we think about the global governance of AI, through the UN or other processes. And at the moment, I don't see that happening. So a few quick sort of take homes that I think are important for the conservation and ecology sector. I think we need to really try to understand what some of the risks of the way that we're using AI are so that we can make informed decisions about that. We need transparency in reporting and talking about when we're using AI and how we're using it, so that others can make their own informed judgment about what they want to trust or not. I do think we should think about how AI might result in quite a profound restructuring of the kind of conservation and ecology workforce. We're going to be losing local jobs to automation, for example, and what might that mean for relationships with local people and careers and livelihoods and the kind of sector that we work within. On that broader point, I think we should be thinking much more about trying to understand and influence how AI is changing wider society and the implications for nature and ecology of that. And I think we should definitely be adopting a critical mindset. That's not to say a negative mindset. It's more about trying to think seriously about the positives and negatives of some of these tools and making sure that we're not kind of falling victim of a kind of techno-utopian mindset where we just sort of assume that technology is going to be the savior and address all the problems that we have. Two papers I'll just put on the screen in case anyone wants to think about this anymore. I wrote an article last year about conservation and AI, which in a much longer form makes much of what I've just said, makes that argument. But also on the right here is an article that we published a few years ago, which is about principles for the socially responsible use of conservation monitoring technology and data. This kind of predates the recent explosion of interest in LLMs and generative AI, but I think it's still got a lot of material in there, which is very useful for thinking about how we deploy and use technology in conservation in a way which advances rather than kind of holds back the equity agenda. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop there and hand over to the next speaker. I can find the button.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was fascinating. Jenna, can I invite you to please present your thoughts?
Yes, bear with me 1 second while I start sharing. Okay. Okay, bear with me 1 second. Okay, can you see that, Jess?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. Okay. So hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today and thank you for the invite to speak at the event. So I'm going to take quite a different stance with my presentation. I'm going to start off by talking about my experience with AI and the models that I've used, both sort of off-the-shelf models and developing my own models. And then I'm going to talk to you about the low middle income country context and the considerations that I think we need to take into account with technology in general and especially AI. And then I'm going to talk about some of the solutions that I see to be able to support low and middle income countries in the use of AI in conservation and a few examples of things that we're working on at the moment. So I've spent the last sort of 10 plus years working with a range of different hardware, from bioacoustics to cameras for insect monitoring and robotics. And every single piece of hardware that I've worked with has required AI to be able to monitor the data due to the scale of the data that we're collecting. And so I've turned often to off-the-shelf products that are available. Some of the very well-known ones that I'm sure you've all either heard of or used. We've got things like Perch, BirdNet, BTO Pipeline, Bat Detect, and then the specific Python packages that you can use for even clustering algorithms now. And I know that BirdNet, you can train models in yourself. So there's a lot of off-the-shelf products available. Some of them are free and open source. Some of them are behind paywalls. And then when it came to studying species where there was no AI models available, that led me to creating my own AI models. So I started off in my PhD creating models for spider monkeys and howler monkeys for the various sounds that they make. Then more recently, I've moved on to working with Conservation International to make models for the pileated gibbon in Cambodia. And recently I've been moving into the freshwater realm, where I think a lot of us will know it's very understudied and there's very few AI models, to trying to start making AI models for fish sounds. So that's led me to the Lake District to develop Arctic char classifiers, which I'm working on with a student from Imperial at the moment. And then hopefully this little video will play. One project I've been involved in for the last few years is based on cameras for insect monitoring. And this is where we've been developing AI classifiers for basically identifying moths from automated camera systems. And so over the last sort of few years while I've been working on this, I've realized the challenges that we're facing. And these are challenges with the hardware and the data analysis. So with the hardware, we've got lots of issues that I'm sure many of you will be aware of, such as device costs, the robustness of devices and how they're functioning, power supply and connectivity issues, in-country expertise, and the geographic bias that we face with hardware. And we face some of these same issues when we're looking at the analysis and talking specifically here about AI. Again, we face a lack of technical expertise, and this can be very biased to sort of higher income countries. There's definitely a species and geographic bias in terms of the models that we've been producing. There's lots of issues about how we study metrics that we're very used to working on, such as abundance and density. How do we build classifier accuracy into our statistical analysis at the end? And then we've got issues such as data storage, which we're all facing. Moving away from that local analysis on our computers to big data processing pipelines, which are very challenging to set up. And I think we're all aware of the lack of training data, and then the lack of accurate classifiers that are in use. And then also moving on, thinking about the actual validation of those classifiers after they've been produced. Bear with me one second. And so there's a lot of people thinking about these issues and the challenges that we're facing. And this is coming in at a political level as well. So in COP this year, we've had a whole outcome, not this year, sorry, a few years ago, there was a whole outcome around capability. And that's where the COP set up the 18 sub-regional technical and scientific cooperation support centres. And one of their remits is to really support countries in utilising science and technology and accessing data and tools. And we can also see in the coming Montreal Biodiversity Framework, we have 2 targets specifically related to this, Target 20, which is all around capacity building and technology transfer, and Target 21 again, which is looking at access to that relevant data and information to be able to inform decision making. So there's a lot going on in this space. And so one thing we're specifically thinking about at the moment is this low middle income country context and the biases that are affecting low middle income countries. And I'm just going to go back to this slide here. I started highlighting in bold the issues that disproportionately affect low middle income countries. And you can see that most of them are highlighted in bold. So all of these issues that we're facing in terms of the challenges and limitations to utilizing hardware and AI, every single person is facing in low and middle income countries, but at an exasperated rate. So we set up a program called Innovate for Nature. And this is funded by the UK government, it's funded by DEFRA. And the aim of this program is to look at the sort of the opportunities for technology. And this includes AI, and it has a heavy data focus. The needs of people in low and middle income countries to be able to access technology and utilize data, and the barriers that they're facing, with the aim of actually developing solutions to enhance the effective adoption and use of technology and the data that comes from it. So just very briefly about this program, we're focusing on 7 different user groups. So we're not just focusing on the scientists, because I think we often think around sort of technology and AI as something that a scientist will do. But everybody is involved in this from the ground up. So we're working with local communities, farmers and fishers, the scientists and the NGOs and the government organizations that might be utilizing AI and technology. But we're also looking at the business and finance sector, who are increasingly needing to use the data that comes from this, and also the policy actors who are actually trying to utilize this data that we're producing for decision making for targets such as the GBF framework. And so this program has worked on lots of different evidence gathering streams, from rapid evidence assessments to questionnaires, interviews and workshops across low and middle income countries, but then with quite an East African focus during our interviews and workshops. And I just wanted to share a few perspectives with you from this program that really do center on the AI side of things. So a lot of our participants were saying that costs of tools remain a key barrier. So a lot of AI tools at the moment are sat behind paywalls that they just simply can't afford to pay for. The AI models that exist just don't cover species for their region. They have lots of issues, more issues than we would perhaps face in data storage and connectivity issues. Cloud-based analysis that is required isn't usually possible for a lot of organizations. And there was what they wanted to stress to us a lot was the preference for something simple technology with built-in analysis and clear insights. And that was because, and linked to this major skills shortage that is seen in low and middle income countries around AI and technology as a whole. And we also received a lot of information from people about the community buy-in and the effect that AI has on communities, and the fact that their buy-in from the very start isn't thought about. What is the benefit to local communities, and therefore what is the trust that they actually have in these systems? And then there was a lot of information, not specifically AI related, but these clear breaks in the chain from field, the data being collected, right up to policy. And I think AI sometimes makes the information at the end of the chain even less interpretable than it was before. And then a lot of political and governance challenges. And one comment that one of our participants mentioned specifically with AI was saying, it's not innovation without implementation. So if we're producing all this technology and we're producing these AI techniques, if they're not utilized on the ground, then can we call it innovation? Which is a comment that really resonated with me. And I won't talk about this too much, but we are going to be synthesizing a lot of information with this pilot in relation to what low and middle income countries need and the barriers that they're facing. And we're going to be working with the CBD to put together a pilot program to actually try and break down some of these barriers to the effective adoption of technologies. And I'm going to very quickly go over a few solutions. So I think from what I've seen with working with these countries on the ground is that we really do need to be building label training data sets to tackle the biases that exist geographically and with species. We need to be developing more species classifiers, building capacity in low and middle income countries for organizations to do this rather than relying on higher income countries. We need accessible, open access tools, such as dashboards for those who don't have data scientists employed in their organizations. And we need offline local processing options as well. We also need to think about storing only what's needed. And then we also need to think about getting that community buy-in from the start. And I'll whiz through within 1 minute a few solutions that we're working on. A very small amount to be able to tackle some of these problems. But one of the things that we're working on with our classifiers is making sure classifiers are well documented to the point of somebody having no experience with Python, being able to go in, pick up a piece of documentation and run a classifier from start to finish, having never used Python before or even maybe coded before. We're working on open accessible AI dashboards so that all the information is accessible to people at the touch of a button if people don't want to go in and utilize Python at all. And we're working on tools that will allow people to take the next steps in terms of validation. Again, push button tools. If anyone's interested, we're working on a validation tool right now, actually allowing people to validate large data sets and then recreate labeled training data sets from that at just the push of a few buttons rather than having to code themselves. So that's just a few things that we're working on and a little bit of a whiz through the lower middle income country context. And I will finish there and stop sharing and pass to the next speaker.
Thank you ever so much, Jenna. Fantastic. Next we have C2.
Hello everyone. I hope you can hear me, and I will just share just one slide with you, showing how we are using AI and how I'm using AI right now, and what's my experience on equity and accessibility to AI platforms. That's the main goal of our discussion. So just a moment. Just can you see my screen?
Not at the moment.
Okay, just this one. Okay. So can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So for the last few years, we are working on species detection, especially the lemurs living in the marsh, in the lake, in the middle east of Madagascar. So we already know that AI can support conservation, and we can use it to the responsibly manner. But there is some opportunities, but also a lot of limitations that we encountered during this study. So I will start just to explain a little bit how we are processing or what's our process. So the previous speakers, thank you to the previous one, already introduced those points about model creation, device accessibility, and also the issue with local capacity building. So the main question we already faced in is what we can do with AI, but the real question is who benefits from AI in conservation and who gets left behind. So there's two questions that I will try to reply today. The first one is about the challenging data collection. Most of the AI model are trained for example, for global north ecosystems and less on tropical ecosystems. So data collection in the area like Madagascar, like Ireland, is less than available data for the global north. It's the same thing for about the communication and data accessibility. in Europe and in advanced country, in developed country, internet access is lower, is cheap, so people and researchers, students can access easily to the data sets, to the model, to the software for training. And it's challenging for an island like Madagascar, who has this issue on internet access, especially for students and researchers. Not only it's expensive, but bandwidth and quality of internet connection is a little bit low. So what can we bring? What can we do to put in place this equity and accessibility for AI tools? The first thing was already introduced by a previous speaker about building a collaboration platform and allowing people and researchers, students to join this platform and to get informed, be informed on AI progress and AI and model improvements. For the last few years, we noticed that using AI and especially drones imagery, satellite imagery, increase a lot the research speed. Like we can gain field time, we can reduce a lot human risk in remote areas and data processing delays. But for instance, the AI using AI and drones is not for everyone because of the cost of the device, cost of software, and capacity building. So I've already heard before a lot of solutions that will be very welcome to build this platform and allow more people to access to AI and new technology for conservation. We already know that Madagascar is a biodiversity hotspot, but only a few model and few species are monitored using AI because of the lack of training, lack of tools, and especially more survey are more concentrated to the field survey and ground survey. We started 3 years ago to introduce drones and satellite imagery for lemurs detection and started to train the model to build this one and share with all stakeholders and NGO in conservation in Madagascar. So to continue with the solution that will be appropriate, not only for conservation, but mostly for researchers, for students, and all conservationists. We have to put in place these open access tools, local training programs, and context-adapted technology solution. We have a real field example in Madagascar that we have around 5,000 hectares of protected area. Daily patrol are conducted on ground, and species detection and counting is still manual. But if we have access to like drones and AI semi-assisted detection, it will help a lot, not only researcher, but specifically the local communities to be informed about what happened in the protected area, what happened around their villages, and it's the way to introduce those people to AI and new technology that reduce the stress and pressure, because when you are using new technology, not everyone knows what are you doing when you're flying your drones, for example. So it's not only about technical training on AI, it's about sensibilization, it's about communication, and especially it's about removing and reducing the fear of new technology. So this conduct me to the next point is the future direction for conservation technology. There's a lot of training algorithms using regional biodiversity datasets. There is also capacity building opportunities like drone mapping, AI data analysis, remote sensing tools, but the limitation is the access to those tools because of internet connection, because of the cost of software and devices. So this involves the equity of AI and new technology access. So what we can do is to involve more people like government, social organization, associations to be more informed about AI capacity, but also the AI limitation. To finalize my speech, I wish to provide and to give some suggestions to all researchers and all students who is following this presentation. We are using AI for data analysis. We are using drone technology for data collection, but ground verification and information from local communities is more accurate, and we need to involve those people during our fieldwork, during our data analysis, to make sure that if we are rating papers or doing some publications in official scientific journal, it will be as accurate as possible. So I'm just following the previous speakers, saying thank you for this invite and hope that this message will reach everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, C2. That was fantastic and very eye-opening. Next up, we have Kelly, who's pre-recorded her talk. Helena, are you able to share that, please?
Yes.
So thank you in advance, Kelly.
Is everybody able to see it? Yes. Okay, let me try with the sound.
Many thanks for this invitation. I'm very pleased to be here to talk to you about responsible AI in conservation. I'm going to touch on the topic of vector ecology and artificial intelligence and if AI can help towards One Health systems. So I started using AI as an enthusiast, like most of us, and I was creating images that I could print into puzzles to use during breakout groups or ice-breaking time during workshops or meetings that we had. And I've asked AI to print, to make me a picture of a wetland with mosquitoes, with some scientists studying the wetland. And I mean, I wasn't particularly impressed because, okay, you know, AI, it's clever, it can create an image, but most of the mosquitoes here in this image are inaccurate. And also the scientists, you know, sometimes they had 6 fingers or they had funny noses, so it wasn't that accurate. So I thought, okay, you know, AI is clever, but it's not that clever. This is why the other day I was particularly surprised when I saw a YouTube video by Yuval Harari from the World Economic Forum in Davos. And he was describing AI as a knife that it can decide to either cut salad or to commit murder. And I thought, you know, that this was quite a statement and we have to seriously look into how we use AI. And this invitation was very timely, actually. So I'm a vector ecologist. I have been working with insects for most of my career, since my master years and PhD years at Imperial. And I've worked for many years with agricultural pests and natural enemies, but the last 11 years I work with mosquitoes, which are very important vectors of human pathogens and a great nuisance. And I am based at the protected area of Akrotiri in Cyprus. Akrotiri is a very important wetland. It's the largest wetland complex on Cyprus. It has salt marshes, a salt lake, and marshes, freshwater marshes. It is a migratory stop for more than 300 bird species. It has many endemic species of plants and insects. And actually it is being under many anthropogenic pressures or threats, such as urbanization. It has a big port, a big airport. And vector ecologists or medical entomologists or public health agencies all over the world, we are now adopting the One Health approach, which has been out for a while for the veterinarians, but now it's becoming more of a pressing need to look on how we can study vectors and we can run our vector management programs while taking into consideration very carefully human health, animal health, but also ecosystem health and biodiversity. And this is a priority, especially because, you know, insects all over the globe are being threatened, and we see negative trends. So a couple of years ago, with a group of vector experts, medical entomologists and ecologists and invasion biologists, we published in the Journal of Applied Ecology a paper about integrated mosquito management in wetlands. And these are the pillars of an integrated mosquito management program in a wetland system, and you can see that it's not an easy skill. It's not as easy as going out and spraying for mosquitoes that could be a problem in the wetland environment. You have to run a surveillance or monitoring program. You have to do habitat management. You have to designate buffer zones that are free of people, source reductions for larval habitats, and you have to monitor non-target impacts. In addition, you have to work in environmental policy and public health and link the two sectors by looking at non-target species, biodiversity and ecosystem services. And of course, you need to run some educational and raising awareness programs for regional authorities, local authorities, the public, citizen scientists, and involve basically people in your decisions, and also make transparent all the applications that you use for mosquito control and all the interventions that you do. And research is essential because it can create evidence, so you need to try to also do some research. So you can see, to combine all that, if you're a small public health agency somewhere on the globe, especially, it's not very easy, and you can get help. I mean, you need as much help as you can get, basically, and AI could be a way to help public health agencies and environmental health agencies. Here you can see the pressures. In this code of practice for mosquitoes, we looked at human and animal health. You consider the ecological network, species richness, and processes and ecosystem services. And of course, you have all the pressures like urbanization, invasive alien species, climate change, agricultural intensification, that do not only affect your vectors, the mosquitoes, they also affect beneficial insects. So again, to be able to understand how all the pressures affect not only human and animal health, but also the vector dynamics or the pollinators dynamics, you need again help, and AI could help towards this. And there are currently some AI applications for mosquitoes, mostly focusing on automated detection and identification of mosquitoes. These applications are related mostly to invasive mosquitoes, such as the Aedes albopictus, the Asian tiger mosquito, and the yellow fever mosquito, that are easy to tell by the bare eye. But I mean, they also focus on Culex mosquitoes. There is like a big application that it's free to use, Mosquito Alert, for example, that can be used in Europe and elsewhere in the globe. And also there are other things that people are experimenting with regarding AI. For example, acoustic bioacoustics and acoustic detection methods for mosquitoes. AI can be used during modeling to predict the mosquito population dynamics and to connect actually different environmental variables with mosquito dynamics. And of course, there are AI applications that could be used in something called sterile insect technique, SIT, which help separate mosquitoes, male mosquitoes from females, and the male sterile mosquitoes are being released to the field to control the mosquito populations. Except of the AI applications that you can use to monitor mosquito dynamics, to either inform your mosquito control practices or simply to understand them. You can also monitor with AI mosquito behavior. Mosquitoes are an integral part of an ecosystem, especially in wetlands, and they're prey or pollinators for different species such as orchids. We know that they pollinate some orchids, but also they're important for birds, for fish, for amphibia. And except of the mosquitoes, when you work in a protected area like in Akrotiri, first you have to do something about the mosquito problem, but also you have to protect other insects, non-target insects, such as pollinators, and AI could help towards the monitoring of pollinators as well. And this is a program that we have been running with early career researchers. We were using the flower insect time counts that are being also used in the UK and a few other countries to look at the different insect taxa that visit flowers. And for that, we had the help of early career researchers, and we have been very fortunate to have them working with us. But unfortunately, as these career researchers were not permanent members of staff, at some point they finished their project, and it's actually not very easy to always have people who will be doing this type of work. So it will be nice to also have an automated system to be able to record beneficial insects in parallel to our mosquito controls, because we want to follow this One Health approach. And this is an automated trap that we've been testing. It was given to us by UKCH. And it works with the light. You can put it out for days or for months, and mosquitoes land on the surface, on the white surface of the trap over here, and they are being recorded. Of course, what we saw when we tried to use it in Cyprus to test this, that we didn't have information about all the moth species, especially the micro moths, and if a human hasn't identified, of course, the moths, the AI does not have any records, so you cannot identify them either. And Insect AI, I'm very fortunate to be part of this project, where it's a cost action actually that brings together scientists and ecologists and computer scientists who work together on image-based AI for monitoring and conservation. And there have been making many traps that use many computer vision systems, let's say, because they're not traps, because the insects are not being harmed. And the insect AI cost action is looking at the societal needs. What do the different groups of entomologists or medical scientists or policymakers need in terms of recording insects? There is a working group looking at the image collection, image processing, and the fourth group is looking at data analysis and integration. And we'll have a big meeting in Serbia in April. And most of the insect AI participants, they work on pollinators and other beneficial insects such as moths. Actually, our host in Serbia is working on chironomids in fresh water, so there is AI activities related to fresh water insects as well. And within the insect AI, we also have a small group which we call vector AI that focuses on vectors such as mosquitoes. And through this vector AI group, we published a paper recently led by Jess Williams from Imperial, looking at the ethical and equitable approaches in AI for vector-borne disease management. And some pressing challenges regarding these approaches are the availability of the different resources that we have, for example, the different systems for recording insects, such as these AMI traps. We also looked at the cost. The cost is challenging as well. Some of the traps that are being used, there are some automated traps also for mosquitoes, but they are very expensive at the moment, which is prohibitory for many organizations or individuals who want to use them, professionals. And also data interpretation is not yet straightforward, so you might collect these systems with computer vision. They collect tons of information, and then interpreting this data needs special skills that not everybody has, so there needs to be work on this. Work needs to be done on this. And equity, they're not available for all, and they should be, and this is a very important issue that we need to consider all of the ecologists who are involved into developing these AI systems, how they can make them available to everybody and address the needs of different groups from all over the world. But we managed to also collect information through this paper on how AI can help reach sustainable development goals. And actually, AI approaches, if they're used ethically, they can help towards all of the sustainable development goals. And as an example, I'm mentioning here a few of the sustainable development goals. For example, by integrating AI technologies into vector-borne disease control and vector ecology, we can improve disease prediction and prevention. And low-income regions could be benefited and reduce economic losses. Education could be improved, for example, by using AI. Perhaps we can also reduce the vector-borne disease burden in children, and they can have better performances at school. And of course, by improving public health, if you have an automated system that you can record mosquitoes timely, and you can monitor mosquitoes timely so that you can intervene and control the mosquitoes timely. It's very important. And you can have sustainable cities and communities through such a system. Thank you very much. That's all from me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for that talk. Now it's time for our Q&A. So please head over to Slido where there have been questions coming in. You can upvote questions on there as well if you think you really want one to be answered. And I'll now hand over to Hermina Anko to take it away.
Yeah. Thank you, Kelly, and everyone for your presentations. As a reminder, yeah, you can submit your questions via Slido. Yeah, it's in the chat. So we've already received some great questions. Let me put it here. Okay, the most obvious question is how should we trade off the benefits of AI use, example, more rapid access to data needed to support decision making, against the environmental footprint of AI use? So would anyone like to respond to that one? This wasn't there. Yeah, Jenna?
I think probably just the first thing to remember is that the AI footprint of the sort of biodiversity monitoring and sort of conservation industries is absolutely minuscule compared to the AI footprint of other activities. So I think we definitely need to take it into consideration and take account of the footprint that we have. But I do think we need to position it within the sort of wider AI environment and the impact that, for example, every single person using Gemini or ChatGPT to ask questions now instead of just putting questions into Google. So I think that's my first comment, is just that I think we need to realize the minimal impact that we do have in comparison to other areas.
Chris, did you want to add to that?
No, yeah, I absolutely agree with Jenna. And the one thing I would add is I heard Cameron Hepburn from Oxford give a talk last year, and he made the point that if you like the sort of bad guys, that the organizations, the corporations that are doing harm to the natural world will be using AI to the max. So there's also an extent to which if you can see huge productivity gains from using these tools, if we kind of tie our hands behind our backs because we're so concerned about what the kind of environmental footprint might be, we might actually be doing ourselves a big disservice, because we could be using these tools to make some breakthroughs that would be really helpful. So yeah, totally agree that we need to think about it, take it seriously, but I think we can also recognize that we're rather trivial compared to the wider world's use of AI.
Thank you, Chris and Jenna. Turning to another question, do you believe AI applications serve as tools for engaging the public with nature and conservation, or are they prone to rather detach users from nature? And this is also open to all the panel. Jenna?
I can go if nobody else is going to. I think as scientists, it's about how we present the tools that we use. So I think we can alienate people with AI if we don't explain what it's doing and the good it can have, and we don't present it in the correct way. But I think there's so much interest in AI at the moment. I think we really have to capitalize on it and explain what it can do. And I think we also need to involve people. Not many people realize, for example, the models that we build using, for example, the moths. People who are going out in their garden and just taking pictures of moths and then uploading it to iNaturalist, and then it ends up in GBIF. We can't do our job without people. We can't do our job without society going and taking these pictures. We need label training data. And I think what we should actually be doing is mobilizing the community to take more pictures and help us build these models. So I think we can involve people even more. And I think the data that we actually produce from technology in general I can give you a few examples if people are interested, has a massive capacity to be utilized in music and art. And so I think we can actually utilize the products of AI for music and art as well as a way to communicate the results of our research back to people.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, I just want to add to what Jenna said, that the more tools we have to engage people, the better. So, especially like for some people in the younger generations who are more into computers and this type, you can approach them and you can intrigue them, let's say, by using AI. So, yeah, we could use it for moths and for other insects that are beneficial, but also for vectors. And actually for the vectors as well, because we ask people to collect data, there isn't so much available expertise in identification everywhere. I mean, for example, for the mosquito alert, we are quite a few experts in each country, but when you get loads of data, it's very difficult managing it. So having AI as an extra tool for entomologists is really helpful as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Chris?
Yeah, I just think it is worth thinking about how some of these technologies might also detach people from nature, that side of the equation, which was in the question. I think, for example, some of the developments that seem to be coming along very rapidly now around kind of multimodal generative models, where you're not just getting text, but you're getting video and sound. And I think we're not very far away from almost being able to kind of have a, kind of world making process where you basically just create a virtual world that you prompt, and then a virtual world is created for you in real time that will be unbelievably engaging and rich and exciting for people to immerse themselves in. And there's a real risk that like nature outside the window is just going to seem really boring by comparison. And I do kind of worry that we might just start to kind of lose people to the digital world almost completely. And I've done a bit of thinking about this in the context of video games or digital games a few years ago, and I'll just share the paper in the chat in a moment. But I think, as with so many of these things, it's a double-edged sword. There are real opportunities, but also some quite big risks that we've got to be careful about.
Thank you, Chris. Let's turn to some more questions directed to specific speakers. So a question for Jenna. How do you fund open access dashboards? This has been a hurdle for projects in the past.
That's a really difficult question. I think I'm working on one open access dashboard now that is dying a death because there's no funding to keep it going. So, but I think they're absolutely needed. I think open access dashboards will probably and should probably end up having some kind of paid model to them. So I think that's probably the way forward, in that maybe some people will pay very little to use them, and some organizations such as business sectors might pay a little bit more. Because we can't make them unless we either need to make them that they require very low input, such as an R package maybe, or we need to make them so that they're fantastic and they work really well, but people pay a nominal amount to use them based on the sort of income of their organization. I think that's probably the only way to do it. But I think one thing I've realized is that if you have an open access dashboard, which will run your models and do everything for you from start to finish, that takes away the need for an organization to essentially have sort of an expensive data scientist on staff maybe. So I think there's a trade-off that I've noticed with a lot of organizations, is that if they can sort of outsource the analysis to somebody and that side of it, it might ultimately save them a lot of money in the long run. So I think it's all a balance. And I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit.
Thank you, Jenna. Another question. Thank you for your talk, C2. Who do you think should be in charge of providing capacity building on the ground? This is directly for C2.
Yes, so recently we conduct a workshop for local researchers and students in Madagascar. So the best people who can conduct capacity building are the researchers and people who have been already involved in AI application, in AI research, especially in conservation. the main challenging thing is that we have to start from the bottom. There is a need of a lot of background, like in programming, in how to use the web browser. So there's these challenging steps that the people who will do the training need to master first before he can share that knowledge to the people who will attend the workshop or the training session for capacity building. So the best approach, in my opinion, is to train people to be a trainer, to be instructor for AI. And those people need to be supported to share these knowledges and to build capacity building in the field. For example, if you are asking people who only speak English to train people in Madagascar, most of us are French speaking, it's very challenging. Even there is a translator next to the instructor or the trainer. So local people who can understand the program can be trained, and this one will share his knowledges and conduct the capacity building locally. Thank you.
Thanks, Situ. Now a question open for all the speakers. AI chatbots are being trained on copyrighted material. I wonder if we as a community should be boycotting or at least restricting our use of these chatbots. Would anyone like to? Kelly?
I think this is too technical for me. I would leave it for Jaina.
Don't give it to me. I was hoping someone else would take that.
Oh, there.
Okay, Situ's wave. Situ's doing it. Yes, Situ.
Sorry. So that's right. The chatbot has full access for copyrighted publications and application and everything. It's very improved for the last few years. Even you are restricting access to this content, the chatbot can find a backdoor to access those data, and their algorithm is well trained and have this access. So it's not fair for other researchers who produce very interesting publication and articles, and it will be used by AI chatbots for free, for example. So I think the open AI platform is an example that can be structured to protect those copyright. I think there is a way to protect this by, for example, like the email we had 10 years ago with electronic signature, with like encryption. So if you need, even the AI need to access some data, you need to have the encryption key that allow you to read and to access. So that will at least limit the access to this data with copyright. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Situ. Chris?
Yeah, just to add a point that as well as talking about copyright data, there's also just a kind of logistical challenge. If I say this because I was talking to some colleagues recently from the IUCN who look after the Red List database, which is an open access database. It's not trying to be hidden or copyrighted, but they say that they're getting over 1 million calls a day to their website from basically bots that are crawling the web looking for data. So and they only update the database twice a year. So it's almost like a denial of service attack. Like they've had to completely rebuild the whole back end of their website to cope with the amount of downloads that they're getting, which is just, basically LLM training models desperately looking for some new data that they can feed in, I guess. But it's become a real problem for them. I don't know if that's the same for anyone else who's had that similar experience, but I can see it being a real challenge.
Thanks, Chris. Moving on to another question. How do we build trust in AI models within communities that may benefit highly from resulting models, but do not currently want to use them? Open to everyone as well. Jenna?
Yeah, I just mentioned very quickly from the studies that we've been doing a lot in sort of local and indigenous communities, the issue is all about buy-in and seeing the benefits to them. We often go in with technologies into communities when the technology is already built and we've got a plan for it and we know exactly how it's going to benefit the nature in the community, and that community is living around that area. So I think instead of doing it that way, we've got to go back to the beginning and we've got to involve communities from the beginning in the technology, in the planning of these programs. We've got to get their buy-in. They've got to understand what the benefits are to them, and then you get the buy-in. If we don't do that, of course, we're going to get fear, we're going to get distrust, and then they're not going to want to utilize any of the technologies that we're bringing in. And there'll be a lot more resistance to the conservation outcomes that they could support. So that would be my opinion, but maybe other people have similar or different opinions.
Thanks, Jenna. Would anyone like to add to that? Chris?
Yeah, and I thought it came through really well in Sito's presentation as well about the crucial role of communication, which I think is similar to what Jenna was saying. The only thing I would add is I would see that as ideally a kind of two-way exchange which doesn't have a predetermined outcome, in the sense that if it turns out that local people, communities that you're engaging with have perfectly valid reasons why they might not want something to go ahead, that it doesn't go ahead. So there's kind of almost like a consent or an FPIC kind of way of framing that process, because and that will kind of help to ensure that you don't end up with some kind of undesirable, unintended outcome from engagement with technology. But I totally agree. If we can get the communication right, there are so many lovely examples where these tools are really empowering when things are done the right way.
Thank you, Chris. Moving to turning to another question. This looks like a technical one. Can global South-North collaboration platforms, CPs, be embracing the long-term and cost-effective remote or online CPs, reducing the travel funding constraints?
Can you repeat the question, Jimena, or pop it in the chat?
Yeah, it's quite a long one. Can global South-North collaboration platforms be embracing the long-term and cost-effective remote or online CPs, reducing the travel funding constraints? I already put in the chat. We can also move to another question if people need to think more about this question.
I think I'm not 100% sure what's meant by collaboration platforms.
If the person who asked this question is here, would they like to turn their mic on or write in the chat?
My question is like capacity building collaboration is essential, right, from between global north and south, according to Kunming Montreal Protocol. So these collaborations are getting stalled because of the traditional boot on the ground collaborations. Everyone needs to travel from global north to south, and south to north. So traveling expenses are included in the project funds. These are all reducing the huge potential of the work need to be done on the ground. To reduce these travel funding related constraints, can we envision a new online platforms, long-term online platforms for collaboration between the global north and south, which can like expedite the conservation activities at the ground?
Situ?
Yes. So I fully understand the Vivek question. Yeah, that's right. The travel funding is very expensive from people like, for example, from Madagascar going to the US or to the UK or to the Europe for training, and it can reduce the fund that could be used for the ground and for research in the local country. So putting the training online is a little bit challenging because, for example, if it's AI, it could be done. It could be in for long terms if there is open source tools available for everyone. But for example, for our case, if you are following a drone training for, let's say, a habitat survey or a simple mapping, if you are doing it online, there's a lot of details that will be lost as you will don't have the practical practice in the field. So there is two aspects that we need to take in account. For theoretical approach, it will be possible, and I think maybe it will be challenging, but it's possible to put online training to share all the theoretical knowledges, data sets, and algorithm. But for practical, like data collection, it will be a little bit difficult to guide someone in around 1,000 kilometers away to do the practice. And at the same time, we have this big issue with internet connection. If there is some issue around the world, so bandwidth becomes very low, and the we will lose details for the training. I hope that can answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Moving on to the next question. I think we may have 3 more questions before the end of the event. So one huge issue we face is interpretability of AI and both understanding and accounting for uncertainty. How do you see this being addressed in conservation? Question open to all the speakers. I've also put it in the chat if you need to look at the question again. Yes, Jenna.
So yeah, I think this is a challenging one. I think that one of the first things we need to do is, as a field, we need to get our language correct. I think there's a lot of different language going around for the same things, and I think even the way we validate our models is done a little bit differently. I think there are very few people who understand what a confidence score is and what it really means, and I think it's very easily misinterpreted. So I think as a field, we have a little bit of sort of capacity building and training to do as a whole, and accounting for the uncertainty. That's something that we are currently looking at. I think I mentioned it briefly in my presentation. We've got to build on the uncertainty of the AI models into our statistical analysis, but current statistical models aren't really set up to do that. And I don't have an answer for how we do that yet, only to say that it is being looked at and people are trying to incorporate it, sorry.
Thanks, Gianna. Situ?
Yes, we had this question for our last workshop. So the big challenge for this is for example, is the barrier language. We can have this article or scientific publication, but if the people in the front can't understand English, for example, or French, it will be very challenging. So I'm joining Jenna about the capacity building and a minimal prerequisites that will need to be met before introducing AI to people. For the second point, I have the same opinion as each context and each project has its own model. We have the basic model already trained and available, for example, based on YOLO model or RFDGTR for object detection. But if you need to detect specific object, you need to build your own model. But before building your own model, you need to understand how machine learning works. And before going to machine learning, you need to at least to know how to use GitHub or to do some codings. So it's a little bit challenging, but not impossible. So this is not only for conservation, but in the global learning system. We need to follow the step-by-step process, not jumping from the bottom directly to AI, because we will be in the wrong way. And the last point is joining the previous presentation about involve people on the ground to reduce the error or false positive on our detection, because they know more than us about the ecosystem and reality in the field. So working closely with them will help a lot to get accurate models and to have accurate results. Thank you.
Thank you, Situ. I think we're gonna have our last question now since we have 4 minutes left. So the last question, could you elaborate on what do you mean by AI here? There's a difference between ML and LLMs, for instance. What forms of AI do you think are most relevant? Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give a technical answer, but I just appreciate the question, and it's something that I've been sort of thinking about a bit in my own language. I mean, I think it's probably reasonable to use AI as a kind of collective term, but then when we're talking about particular implications of particular things, I'm probably guilty of sort of slipping a bit between, things which are actually very different from each other. And I suppose the thing that's got me particularly interested in AI and conservation is probably more about generative AI and the things that have come out of LLMs in the last few years and what they might do to really be quite transformative in wider society. Whereas, of course, machine learning and some of those other techniques have been around for a lot longer and have been used in ecology for a long time, albeit probably on a rapidly accelerating curve recently. So, yeah, colleagues on the call will be able to speak better about the technical side, but I just think it's a really good question and something we should all be quite careful about.
Thanks, Chris. Just because of time, I'm just gonna pass back to Jess. Thank you for all the attendees for their questions and for all the speakers for their great answers. I'll pass it to Jess now.
Thank you, and thank you for that brilliantly led Q&A session, Hamina. I just want to say a huge thank you to all our speakers. It's been a pleasure listening to you today, and a huge thank you for everyone joining us. We are going to aim to write up this session as a blog on our website, so do please keep an eye out for that. As I mentioned at the start, this is our second event in our Project Forward initiative, and if anyone has any other ideas for events or training they'd like to see us run, please do get in touch and let us know, and you can find our email on our website. And yeah, please stay in touch with our newsletter, and I hope to see you at an event or our BES annual meeting pub quiz soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.